talking about the different perspectives of the Yemais Mashiach. And just to recap where we're up to this point, we talked about the fact that when we talk about Yemais Mashiach, we have to understand what the purpose of the world is. And we could see the purpose of the world from the philosophical point of view, or Shakira. We can see it from the halachic point of view, and we can see it from the previous inyanim. Okay, up here in Kabbalah, up in Hasidus. So we will look first at the first two, and we said that the first idea, mitzad Chakira, it's what the Rambam talks about in Hilchos Tshuva, this idea of what is the purpose of creation is for man, and everything in the world is created for man. And man's ultimate purpose is to be able to use what he has that is different to any other creation, and that's his brains. And therefore, the man is here to learn as much as he can from the world around him, and ultimately to be able to do that and sharpen his brain and his mind so that he can learn about Hashem. And if that's the purpose of the world, then the purpose of Yemais Mashiach is to enable man to further that even more by getting rid of anything that's going to stop him from learning Torah. And in that way, it's the Yemais Mashiach is the time that we have our own malchus. We're not mandated by anybody to do whatever it is that we're mandated to do at this moment, to be locked down and to have vaccines and to do whatever it is. We have our own government. It's our Torah, and that's it. And a Yidden can sit and learn Torah and learn about Hashem. And what is the purpose of Yemais Mashiach in that sense? It's in order to help the person be zoiche to the ultimate reward, which from the philosophical point of view is knowing Hashem completely, and that can only happen when the neshama and guf are separated. So it's the ultimate reward is Olam HaNeshamas. We said the second perspective is that Hashem created the world in order to be king. Now, if that's the case, that means the purpose of Yemais Mashiach is for Hashem to be king. And for Hashem to be king means that people follow and do Torah mitzvahs. So we looked at these two things and we asked how these are the two perspectives, and if this is what the Yemais Mashiach are, do they not sound like they're two opposite things? So in our last class or two ago, we talked about the fact that we can see them in terms of a worker, an employer, and an employee. So a worker and an employee, the worker, the employer and the employee. The employer, he has some sort of a business or a job to do, and that is his goal. He has whatever he has, and his ultimate goal is the success of that business, and whatever the goal of that business is. The person he hires, for that person, all they want to know is that they're going to get paid. So they're working in order to make a living. So in that case, we could say from Hashem's point of view, he created this world to be king. And like the Alter Rebbe explains in Shar Yuchad V'Amunah, you can't be king without people, without a nation, without people who feel separate. So from Hashem's point of view, he wants to be king. But from the person's point of view, it's about what reward he can have. And therefore, the Rambam is what we explained to this point. It's like the employer is Hashem, and he employs us to do the job down here, to do his mitzvahs, to follow his decrees. And that's what Hashem wants. And for us, it's about the schar. So for us, the schar, a person says, what's the benefit for me? And we say, well, the benefit for you is that you're going to be zeicha to this tremendous knowledge of Hashem in Olam Haba. We then took these two perspectives and said that if you look at the Rambam himself, we have many places where the Rambam talks about Mashiach. The Rambam talks about Mashiach in Hilchos Tshuva. The Rambam talks about Mashiach in Hilchos Malachim. And the Rambam talks about Mashiach in Perish Mishnayos. So we saw that in Hilchos Tshuva and in Hilchos Malachim, we looked at the differences there, and this was 2 classes ago, and we basically said that at that point, that in Hilchos Tshuva, we see the Rambam addressing the person, because what is the benefit of the person? Why should the person want to do tshuva? Why should the person want to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And therefore, in Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam looks at that point of view and talks about the fact that in the times of Mashiach, will be a time that we will have, everything will be the same, except that we will have our own government and we will be free to learn Torah mitzvahs. In Hilchos Malachim, of course, the Rambam was talking about Hashem as the king and having a Malchus Beis David, having the Beis Hamikdash, being in Eretz Yisrael, all of that in order for us to be able to fulfill all of the mitzvahs the way it would be if Hashem was ultimately the king. We finished off in our last class, we didn't quite finish it, discussing the fact that in Perish Mishnayos, in the introduction to the 10th paragraph of Sanhedrin, there the Rambam also describes Mashiach. And the question is, there we see some differences again between what we saw in Hilchos Tshuva, what we saw in Hilchos Malachim, and what we have in this Parish Mishnais. And we read this last time in terms about the description of the Rambam in Parish Mishnais. And we first of all talked about context, that there the Rambam was trying to differentiate between Adam Haba, Gan Eden, Chiyas HaMesim, Yimais Mashiach. What are the differences between those things? What's going to happen in each of those times in order to clarify what's going on, like what each of those times are. Okay, so so we said in the Parish Mishnais, and this is what we discussed in our last class, that there you see the Rambam starting off discussing the fact that we are going to return to Eretz Yisrael, and we're going to have Malchus, and talks about David HaMelech, or Malchus, someone from Malchus based David, who's going to be very, very great, even greater than Shlomo HaMelech. All the nations are going to come to him. They're going to be awed by all the nisim, all the miracles that he does, and he's going to basically rule over the entire world. And in that Parish Mishnais, that is where we find the Yud Gimel Ikrim. And of course, we know that the 12th of the 13th of the Yud Gimel Ikrim, the 13th is about Chiyas HaMesim, the 12th one is about our belief in Yemais Mashiach. So today I'll begin, and then I see Chassi, you're going to be happy to read. So I will read a little bit, and then I will hand it over to you. So what we want to see is, and this is where we ended last time, that, and let's just go back one little paragraph. So if we look at Lafit Arkenu Adkan, based on everything we've said till now. So again, Naimar Sheish Kan Shnei Inyanim Shayim. If we look at the Rambam again, just in here, in this area of Parish Mishnais, we once again see two different things. So just like we saw the Rambam saying different things in Hilchos Tshuva and in Hilchos Malachim, once again here in Parish Mishnais, we once again see the Rambam discussing Mashiach in two different ways. First of all, we see B'tchilas Dvarav Balavar Es Mahusam Shal Yemais Mashiach Kishala Atzmam. So at the beginning in Parish Mishnais, here we see at the beginning when he describes Mashiach in this paragraph. And of course, in our book, we are on page 50 of the Sefer in Inyan Shel Mashiach. So there, the Rambam is discussing and describing Mashiach as he is for himself. How it is from the point of view of Hashem. Why does Hashem want a king once again from Malchus based David? And that's and we see quite similarities then at the beginning of Parish Mishnayos to the way the Rambam describes Yemais Mashiach in Hilchos Malachim, where he starts off the idea that Al-Kach, right? Similar ideas that first of all, we're going to have our own governments. The Malchus, the kingship, will return to the Jewish people. This is very similar to the end of Mishnah Torah when he talks about in the halachas. So we find the same thing, that Melech HaMashiach is going to return Malchus Beit David to what it was. But then but in Parish Mishnayos, when the Rambam continues to talk about what it's going to be like, he seems to continue to explain now what the benefit of it, what the benefit in this is for man. And he says, he continues, describes the great things that will happen for people at that time. He's going to reach the epitome of what he can reach. It's complete. He'll be as complete as he can possibly be in this in the world, and to reach that shleimus in Olam Haba b'daim l'dvar b'Hilchos Tshuva, which again sounds like what he said in Hilchos Tshuva. So we had Hilchos Tshuva, we had Hilchos Malachim, and now we have Parish Mishnayos. We seem to start off like Hilchos Malachim, and then continues on to sound a little bit more like Hilchos Tshuva. Okay, so that's what it seems like when you first read it. You say, okay, so then I can compare these in the same way that I did the other ones. I can say, okay, this is like what we said before, right? The payalim and the payal, the worker, the employer and the employee. Maybe it's the same thing. However, we're going to see that there's actually a few other differences. If we look very carefully in Perish Mishnais, that is not found in Hilchos Tshuva or in Hilchos Malachim, that's unique to what's in Perish Mishnais. And so tonight we want to understand again what the Rambam is trying to emphasize in Perish Mishnais and why we have differences. So, Chassi, you said you wanted to read, so would you like to take the mic now?
Okay, I'm happy to read. I don't know the sikha here as you do, so I'm not going to be able to explain it. Or maybe give us just the heads up as well in terms of tachlis. What's the punch in terms of like?
Again. Okay. All right. So I'll start again. We see from the beginning.
But also, can I just ask one other thing? You mentioned earlier that the ultimate is also when the neshamas are going to be separate to the gufim, and I don't. That's the first time I'm seeing that as so it's Ches Amazing. So that's different stages you're saying, or
no? Okay, so again, if you're joining us now and have not been with us until this point, so then it's going to be a little bit hard to understand. So I'll say it very briefly, but we are starting from the very beginning of the Sefer. And in order to understand everything, we have to take everything apart from the very beginning. And I know you have a little baby, so mazel tov to you. I'm going to mute you. I'm sorry, because the little baby makes it hard to hear. And what we're saying is that there are different perspectives. We're not yet saying what the ultimate is and what the Rebbe says we believe ultimately in. What we are now saying is from a theoretical point of view to properly understand the different things that we see in the Rambam. And when we talk about Hilchos Mashiach, we started off in the beginning of our Sefer here discussing ultimately we have to understand the purpose of the world, because Yemais Mashiach is the time when the world reaches Shleimus. So if I'm going to talk about Shleimus, and we're going to see the Rambam talking about different points in different places, we have to recognize that we're talking about Shleimus in the world. And when I say the Shleimus of the world in Yemais Mashiach, that's going to depend on what I think the reason for creation is. Now, we can look at the reason for creation from different perspectives. We have not yet said what our end result is. We're just talking right now theoretically. How do we understand the differences in the Rambam between what he says in Hilchos Tshuva and Hilchos Malachim and now in Perish HaMishnayos? So that's what we're really up to right now. And yes, from the perspective of Chakira, from Jewish philosophy, then the ultimate is for man to reach the ultimate of what he can do. And that is to be able to know as much as he can about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And because we are human beings in a body, our body is always going to limit us. So we cannot say that our brains in a physical body is going to be able to understand Hashem to its fullest. And therefore, what happens automatically as a result of that view is that we have to then say that the ultimate reward, if that ultimate reward is to understand Hashem fully, then we cannot receive that ultimate reward while we are still in the body. And that's why, if we're looking at it from that perspective, as the Rambam talks about in Hilchos Tshuva, he therefore says, in terms of what's the point for man, why should he try to strive to be close to Hashem? And we say, because you ultimately do the best you can in this world, Yemais Mashiach, nothing will stop you from learning, and that will gain you access to an Olam Haba, where your neshama will be able to grasp everything that it cannot grasp while you're in the body. But that was from Chakira's point of view. The Rambam doesn't stick with that view only. In Hilchos Malachim, he takes on a different view. And he tells us something a little bit different and talks to us about that the time of Mashiach is a time when we have Machos Beis David, and we're going to do all the mitzvahs, and we're going to be free to do all the mitzvahs. And then there's going to be Tchias HaMeisim. He hints to it as well. So we have to understand right now, we are not up to what is it that we need to know. We have another 500 or so pages to get there. Right now, we're trying to understand this progression of how the Rambam says different things in different places. So, therefore, we go on and say, so when we go into Perish HaMishnayos, and we see that the Rambam there says a little bit of what sounds like things that he said in Hilchos Tshuva, a little bit of what it sounds like he's saying in Hilchos Malachim. It's a little bit more than that. If we're very careful and we're very pedantic and we look at the details, Nimtza, kama hevdeli mashmu'usim ben dvar sham ledvar behilchos melech HaMashiach. We find that there are some very, very key differences in the things that the Rambam says in Parashah Mishnayos to what he says in the Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Melech HaMashiach. And these are very important differences. Okay, so even though it sounds similar at the beginning, oh yes, we're going to have Malchus Beis David again. When we look very carefully, it's not quite the same. So how do we find that? And Chasi, when your baby is quiet, please unmute yourself and I'll let you jump in. So Aleph, Behilchos Melech HaMashiach, Harambam Maskir Bekitzur Shemashiach Machzer Malchus David Yashna. So we know the end of Mishnah Torah. The Rambam says in very short that Mashiach is going to give us back Malchus Beis David. And then Marich L'Tayr Pratius Eshleimus Kim HaMitzvah Sheyeh La'asi. So then again in the Hilchos Mashiach, the Rambam then follows up with giving us in detail what Shleimus Kim HaMitzvahs is going to look like. How are we going to have this ability to fully keep all the mitzvahs? And therefore, the Rambam in Hilchos Mashiach continues and tells us, Shem Mashiach B'nai HaMikdash, Mekabes Nitchei Yisrael. He's going to build a base in Mikdash. He's going to gather us all to Eretz Yisrael. Why? What's the purpose of that? Shazai Chayzin Kol Mishpatim B'Yamav Kishayu Mikaidim. Because then all the mitzvahs will get them back like they were in the times of David and Shlomo HaMelech. Makridim Karbanos. Right, we'll be able to bring the karbanos. We'll do all the shmita and yavel. Like all the mitzvahs that are written in the Torah, we are going to be able to do all of that. Now, in the Parashah Mishnah in Mishnayos there, Harambam Marich L'Tayr Pratius Ekdulas Malchus HaMashiach. If we go back to that paragraph on the previous page, we see the Rambam doesn't stress here the greatness of doing all the mitzvahs. Let's have a look again. Okay, yeah, that sounds similar. But then he doesn't continue in saying, and we're going to have the base of Mikdash, and we're going to be able to do Shemitah and Yavel. What does he say? Okay, so now we're on another level. The Rambam has now veered off, and he's stressing, even though the first sentence seems to be the same, he then diverges to discuss Melech HaMashiach himself, how great he's going to be, and how great his name is going to be. That is not something that we find in Hilchos Melech HaMashiach. Okay, so he talks about the Dulas Malchus Shel Mashiach, how great his kingdom is going to be. The Eino Masker Klal Eidos Binyan HaMikdash, Yeshiva La'aretz, Shleimus HaMitzvah Shetiya Az. We don't see any mention of the building of the base of Mikdash, of our return to Eretz Yisrael, of the fact, like he says in Hilchos Mashiach, that we're going to be able to do all the mitzvahs, like the karbanos and Shemitah and Yavel and everything like that. We don't see that at all. So he starts off by saying we'll get Malchus Beis David, but then he goes on really to elaborate on the greatness of this person who we call Mashiach. So that's one key difference. Another thing we see, the Hilchos Melech HaMashiach, Harambam Makdir Yimais Mashiach Kechazaris Limei David U'Shlomo. Those are the words in Hilchos Melech HaMashiach. That's what the Rambam. That's how he frames Yimais Mashiach, a return to the times of David and Shlomo Melech. And these are the exact words, right? Lahachzir Malchus David liyashna lemamshala harishayna. We're going to return Malchus Beis David liyashna to how it was of old, to that first kingdom that we had before the split. We're going to be able to do all the mitzvahs the way they were before. In other words, when we were all united under Shlomo HaMelech, before it was split with Yeravim and Rechavam. The Sulai, and that's it. That's what the Rambam says. Because in those times, the Malchus of Hashem, the fact that Hashem was a king over Bnei Yisrael, was very clear through Malchus Beis David, because Malchus Beis David was in its complete form. And all the Yidden were united, and they were all keeping the Torah mitzvahs. Therefore, because that's the focus, we were united, we were all in Eretz Yisrael, we were able to keep the mitzvahs. That therefore becomes the correct example or the fitting example to compare what Mashiach is going to be like, because the emphasis is on the unity of Bnei Yisrael with the base of Mikdash and the ability to fulfill all of the mitzvahs. However, Ach, beperish HaMishnah, Ra'im b'divrei HaRambam b'gisha acheres. When we look at Perish Mishnayos, the Rambam is taking a different approach. Ki Kanal, like we said before, HaRambam Kaisav Sham b'nageli Mashiach shezichar yiyim lehagayim yosim min hamelech shleim. We saw in the Perish Mishnayos, the Rambam is not saying it's going to be like David and Shlomo. In fact, he says something different. He's saying that Mashiach is going to his name is going to be he's going to be known among the nations of the world even more than Melech Shlomo HaMelech. So not that it's like the return of the kingdom of Shlomo, it's more. He's going to have a mila and more honor than any king that we've ever had. The Rambam doesn't say anything of this sort in Hilchos Melech Mashiach. Okay, so far we see again the stress of the fulfilling of mitzvahs that's in Hilchos Melech Mashiach. That's not in Perish Mishnayos. Perish Mishnayos just has one liner, return of the Malchus, and goes on. It doesn't say anything about being able to keep all the mitzvahs. The second key thing we've seen in Hilchos Melech Mashiach, it's a return to the Malchus based David as it was. Whereas in Perish Mishnayos, it's really saying that Mashiach is going to be even greater than Shlomo HaMelech. That's not how it was. That's something different. He's going to be even more known in the world. And the third key difference, B'Hilchos Melech HaMashiach, Kasav Rambam, Al Yalal Da'at Chasha Melech HaMashiach Tzarech Lasas Isis U'Maifsim, O'Mechadish Dvarim Ba'olam O'Mechayim Meisim Ela Olam T'Minhag V'Naheg. Right, the very famous line of the Rambam. We have an entire separate sikha of the Rebbe on this, where the Rambam says you should not think that Melech HaMashiach is required to do miracles or to bring something new into this world, or that he must do Tchias HaMeisim. Rather, the world is going to continue in its natural way, the way we know it now. Well, almost like the Perish Mishnah, we just saw that the Perish Mishnayos, the Rambam was saying that he's going to be known, Mashiach is going to be known in the whole world. All the nations are going to know him. How? And how are they going to be attracted to him? What was the key? We look back. What was the key the Rambam was saying here? And he's going to have all these great things. Why? Because of all the neflais shehiyah al yadai. Because of all the wonders that are going to happen through him. And that's going to attract everybody to him. So here we see an emphasis on all these wonders, yet in Hilchos Melech Mashiach, the Rambam says, doesn't have to do anything. Okay. Now again, when we talk about these wonders, on the Pashtas move on, we can very simply understand. Doesn't say that, doesn't mean that at that time, necessarily that Mashiach is going to do miracles that are going to completely change Teva, like reviving of the dead. Because when the Rambam says in Perish Mishnah that Mashiach is going to do wonders, doesn't mean that they're going to be wonders that are going to completely change nature, because he also does say there that the Mashiach of things are not going to change. So therefore we could not say that when the Rambam says there'll be wonders on the hands of Mashiach, he's talking about wonders that are possible within Teva, within nature. For example, for example, when you have a sudden hailstorm, right? Or a sudden locusts that come. Right, you can argue there are times in life. I mean, here in Melbourne, we see it all the time. Suddenly, the sun is shining. The next second, you have a hailstorm happening. So you can have strange things. There are miracles, really, but they're dressed in teva. A sudden swarm of locusts come. The issue is that there's no mention whatsoever of anything wondrous in the hands of Mashiach at all in Hilchos Melech Mashiach. And so that's another key difference between Perish Mishnayos and Hilchos Melech Mashiach. Okay. And what is the fourth difference? The Hilchos Melech Mashiach Rambam medaber beikar al peulas Mashiach beinyanim hanogeim lebnei Yisrael. In Hilchos Melech Mashiach, once again, we see the Rambam is mainly talking about the things that Mashiach is going to do that are relevant to the Jewish people. Sharei Binyan HaMikdash, Kibbutz Galias, Chazaras Mishpatei HaTorah Liyoshnam, Kol Eilin Yanim Hanoigim Noigim the Yisrael Gafkin. These are all things: building the base of Mikdash, gathering in of the exiles, returning all the Torah. These are all in Yanim that are relevant to the Jewish people. Even when it talks about the fact that Mashiach is going to fight the wars of Hashem and he's going to be victorious over all the nations, this is explained as a victory over the nations who are kvetching us, right? Who are stopping us from fulfilling the mitzvahs. It's only at the end. It's only at the very end of Hilchos Malachim that the Rambam mentions that he's going to also rectify the entire world and bring the whole world to serve Hashem. We saw that in Perish Mishnayis, the Rambam goes on at length and elaborates on this relationship that Mashiach is going to have over all the people. So we had that first line, it's Chazaras and Machos, but then it's about how great his name is going to be and how everyone's going to flock to him, and because of the wonders of his hand, and that anyone who stands up against him, he will fight them. So it's really seems to be elaborating on this relationship between Mashiach and the nations of the world. We'll move on. So we have to understand that these differences actually are connected to each other. And how are they connected to each other? Because in the halachas of Melech Mashiach, we're describing Mashiach as someone who's bringing back all the mitzvahs. And we know that doing the mitzvahs, well, that is relevant to the Jewish people alone. And therefore, in the end of Mishnah Torah we know is a sefer of halacha of mitzvahs. So it makes sense at the very end of Mishnah Torah, when we're going to talk about our ability to be able to complete all of the mitzvahs that are written there. So then that's Nageya to the Jewish people, and therefore it's Nageya for us to know that we're going to have a melech, a king like David and Shlomo, not anything more than that. We don't need to have any special wonders. But Perish Mishnah, the Taras Mashiach Kamelch Kala Olam Kulai. When we look at Perish Mishnah, the Rambam there describes Mashiach not just as a king over the Jewish people, but as a king over the entire world. So how does Mashiach become a king over the entire world? He achieves that, you could say, status that they all follow him through the wonders that he's going to show. And then that way he will become greater, more and more, even more the Shlomo HaMelech. So what we want to understand is, why does the Rambam stress have these different emphasis in his Perish Mishnayos to Melech Mashiach? Rivki, would like to jump in? You can take over, please. Thank you.
Are you ready? Because if you're ready, you can be first. I'll be more than happy.
So my baby just fell asleep, so I can read a little bit. By the way, how long does this go for?
It goes for 1 hour.
Okay, so I hope I can stay for all of it. Okay, so I'll join in now. Is it okay if I'm doing it in Israeli accent?
Go ahead.
ההבדל בין דברי הרמב"ם בהלכות מלך המשיח לדבריו באיגרת תימן בנוגע לסדר התגלות המשיח. So in the same, should I explain word for word? So in the same Inyan, or maybe do you want to explain? I can explain. How do we want to do this?
Okay, right. So me'inyan le'inyan, we're saying, what do we mean me'inyan le'inyan ba'isa inyan, right? Of course, that's an expression that we're saying from one thing to another in the same idea. So in other words, we're talking about the Rambam and the differences that we see in different places of the Rambam, right? So if that's the case, so what we see here is this idea that that the in
that he has differences of opinion, differences of ways he describes about Mashiach.
That's right, in Igeres Teman. So far we've seen there was a difference in Hilchos Tshuva to Hilchos Malchim Malachim. And then we saw it, and then there's Perish Mishnais. So now we're saying, before we explain the differences, we now go Me'inyan Le'inyan Ba'isa Inyan. We want to see again another example of where the Rambam seems to contradict or seems to talk differently in his own works. So now we're going to see again, there's another place where the Rambam differs, and that's a difference in the Rambam's Igeres Teman versus, again, Hilchos Malchim Mashiach. And in this case, we're talking about the Seder Hisgalus Mashiach. In other words, what's the order? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. בהלכות מלך המשיח, הרמב"ם מתאר את משיח בפעולותיו, כנזכר לעיל, בדרך טבעית לחלוטין. So in the Hilchos Melech Mashiach, the Rambam explains and describes he describes Mashiach and his actions and things that he does in a completely natural way. ובהתאם לכך, הרמב"ם מתאר את סדר התגלותו של משיח. And according to this, or in this line, he's also describing the way he is going to be מסגלה בתהליך טבעי של מלחמה וניצחון, in also a natural form, which is going to be through war and winning this war. תהליך שיכול להמשיך זמן מסוים, ושעד סיומו יש מקום לספק אם זהו אכן המשיח. So this could be a long process, and within that time frame, there's also a question, there's also a suffix whether this is it's not definite that this is actually Mashiach. We're going to be then, through this process of him being able to win this war in a natural way, we'll be able to see that this is Mashiach ודאי. כיוון שיש בו גם מקום לכישלון והפסד, because there is an option of him not being successful in this and therefore failing and not being actual Mashiach. ובלשונו יעמוד מלך מבית דוד, there'll be a king from the family of David, וילחם מלחמות Hashem, and he's going to fight the wars of Hashem, which earlier you described this is to bring Torah and mitzvahs in a possible way for everyone to keep. אם עשה והצליח וניצח, if he did this and succeeded and won this war, בנה מקדש במקומו, and he was able to build the base of מקדש in its place, וקיבץ נדחי ישראל, and was able to bring all the Jewish people from all the corners of the land, the earth, הרי זה משיח בוודאי. This then proves that he is going to be the Mashiach, and this is a final thing. ואם לא יצליח עד כה, but if he didn't succeed until here, או שנהרג בידוע שאינו זה שהבטיחה עליו התורה. But if he was killed, or חס ושלום, something happened in this process, then this is not the Mashiach that the Torah has promised us.
Right. And the example, of course, of this, the Rambam brings us, is Bar Kokhba and Koziba, right? Fighting a war. But when you're fighting a war, because it's a process, ad siyuma, until the war ends, until the final victory, there's still doubt whether it's going to actually be what it's going to be. Okay, so this is what the Rambam says in Hilchos Malchim Mashiach. However, continue.
Thanks for the compliment. Who was it? Whoever wrote. Thank you, and thank you, Sara, for explaining this so well and bringing it all, making it possible. Okay, and I'll continue a little bit more. ולעומת זאת, באיגרת תימן, and to the contrary, in a contrary manner, we see in איגרת תימן, הרמב"ם מתאר את התגלותו של משיח כהתגלות פתאומית, that suddenly Mashiach is going to appear not when he's describing the revelation of Mashiach, not like he described it over there in a very natural way, where it's going to be a war, etc. And this long process here, suddenly it's here in Igeres Teman, it's describing his revelation as a sudden, appearance of a wondrous sudden appearance. Yamod ish shelo noda kodem. There'll stand a man who we didn't know about beforehand, before he had revealed himself, before we see him. והאותות והמופתים שהיו על ידו, הם הראיות על אמיתת ייחוסו. And these amazing wonders, miracles that he's going to do are going to be the proof that this is actually Mashiach. בשעה שיגלה ייבהלו כל מלכי הארץ, everyone, suddenly when he's going to appear, everyone's going to be completely frightened, all the kings of the nations, all the other, all the other kings around the world, from hearing what he's doing, ויפחדו ותיבהל מלכותם, and they're going to be really afraid, and their whole kingdom also is going to be scared. ייבהלו מן המופתים, they'll be scared of these miracles that they'll see, these miracles that they'll see על ידו. וישימו ידם לפיהם, they'll like grasp their mouth. ימית כל מי שירצה להמיתו בדיבורו, ולא יוכל להימלט ולהינצל ממנו. And what is this? He's gonna kill them by his mouth, by what he's saying.
So anyone who's going to stand up to try to kill Mashiach, he'll kill them with his mouth.
B'diburo? What's b'diburo? By his
mouth. Yes, with his, because we know that
his wondrous, like if he has powerful word, he'd be able to say,
maybe it's in Mefarish, maybe it's whatever it is, but he has power, and there's no way that they're going to be able to get away from him, right? They're not going to be able to escape. If they try to kill him, he'll kill them first.
So this is going to be a completely wondrous process. Should I continue?
Yep.
Okay, ולכאורה אפשר לומר נקודת הביאור בזה, and לכאורה we can try to explain what the reason for these differences of the Rambam's opinion. שאכן יש כאן שתי דרגות במשמעותו של משיח, ושני אופנים בגילוי המשיח. So לכאורה, this is a לכאורה, so he's trying to give an explanation why there are two completely contrary opinions, and he's saying this because he's saying that maybe the reason is because this is two different levels of the meaning of what Mashiach is, and therefore there's two different ways of him appearing and him being miskale. So, and is that referring to the way of is that connecting also to what you said of an employer and about Hashem's aspect, or is that just basically what the purpose of the world is? What's the purpose of the world?
No, keep going, you'll see. In other words, what are we talking about here? We want to just understand what the Rambam is saying in Hilchos Mashiach versus Igeres Teiman. So we go on to this. Continue from here.
כי אמרו חז"ל, because חכמינו זכרם לברכה say, שבגאולת ישראל ייתכנו שני אופנים. There could be two ways of the גאולה coming. זכו אחישנה ולא זכו בעיתה. So it could be, maybe he's saying it's because of if we're zoiche that Mashiach should come in the right, in the from our actions or from in the right way, where in the ofen of zchia, then he'll come in a quick way. And if chas v'shalom we're not zoiche, and he'll come be'ita, which means in his time. So if it'll come quicker, it will come at the at the ketz. And that's the achishena is obviously the pitaim. Suddenly he's going to appear, and the be'ita is going to be through the process. Is that right?
Yes.
ועל דרך זה זכו עם ענני שמיה. And if he comes in a quick way, then it'll be ענני שמיה. לא זכו, אני רוכב על חמור. If we're not זכי, it'll be like a poor person riding on a donkey. גאולה טבעית או גאולה ניסית. Whether it's going to be a miraculous גאולה or a one that is מלובש בטבע. A natural one. ומבאר על כך הרבי. And the Rebbe explains here and expands שבכל מקרה, that in any event, סוף כל סוף תהיה הגאולה בניסים ונפלאות. In any event, at the end there is going to be nisim and niflos, there is going to be miracles and wonders. K'divrei Rambam anal, like we saw what he's saying above, is that in Yarsa Taiman, bepirush, in bepirush Mishnah, odot niflot shemashiach yireh. From what we see and what he says in the Mishnah, that Mashiach, his personality is going to be such a wondrous personality, and all the nations are going to, come and hear and see. אלא שהחילוק הוא האם נפלאות אלו יהיו מיד עם תחילת התגלות המשיח. Question is, the difference of opinion is whether it's going to be immediately as soon as he reveals himself. שזהו זכויים ענני שמיא. So that's if we're זויכה, then it'll be ענני שמיא and it'll be immediately miraculous. או שהתגלות משיח תתחיל בדרך הטבע, or that the revelation will start in a natural way. אני רוכב על חמור, it's a person, and יעמוד איש, מבית דוד, and it's a poor person riding on a donkey, ורק בהמשך ישראל יעלו מדרגה לדרגה ויזכו לגילוי של משיח בכל תוקפו על הטבע, על טבעי. And then it'll be a process that ultimately we'll see that this is Taka Mashiach, and then all of these miracles will also be revealed, but it will initially start with a natural process. ובהתאם לעיקרון זה מבאר הרבי, and according to this,
the key thing here too is the fact that when Mashiach starts off that way, because ultimately, like we said, in Igeres Teiman is saying, we'll talk about miracles. Perish B'Shnais, we also see, miracles. So ultimately what we're saying here is that if we're Zaycha, immediately we see miracles. And if not, if it's in B'derech HaTeva, but then we have Rak B'Hemshech Yisrael Yalu Midarga L'Darga. We'll see that when Mashiach comes, even if Mashiach begins in a very natural way, but then the effect of that, as a continuation of that revelation, B'nai Yisrael will end up becoming greater and greater. They will be elevated from level to level until the point that they will be Zaycha to a miraculous revelation. So even if they start off not being Zaycha, so that Mashiach has to come, still as a result of Mashiach B'chal coming, they will be able to reach greater and greater levels until ultimately they will be able to see the miraculous aspect of Mashiach. Okay, so just a matter then of at what point are we going to see miracles? Is it going to be when Mashiach comes, as soon as he's revealed, we automatically see miracles right at that point? Okay, that's a zachu, an achishana idea, or is it that Mashiach will come, but saf kosaf, even if he comes without miracles, because he's going to be a great person, who's going to be a teacher, he's going to end up allowing us, even if it's Olam Kiminhag and Naiheg, that means it's a time that we're going to be able to sit and learn. We will be then Zayche to Gilui of miracles. Yeah?
Yeah.
Just it's immediate or a little bit later.
Also just asking about this process of lo zachu. So is that also saying that he will appear, like he is going to appear, like he is going to come, this person is going to come riding on a donkey.
Well, the idea of riding on a donkey is not literally a donkey. It is that he'll begin the derech hateva. Okay, so the
so that's
is the expression that epitomizes or reflects this natural appearance. Okay, nothing miraculous, but a natural leader emerges and leads us.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we then are Zaycha, we go from level to level, we become better and better, and then we're Zaycha to miracles.
And when you're saying that he's not going to actually appear on a donkey, is that clear in terms of not actually definitely not going to be, or is it could be as well? Like, is it?
It's the idea.
Because what I'm saying is, and also my question also here is how many years is that process? Because it said that it's going to be, it could be a process that you can see that even in this process, maybe he isn't going to be successful, or it will happen, or it won't happen, or so
there we don't have a time frame, because that time frame depends on us.
But right? if it's lo zachu, it's ultimately going to happen at a particular time, because Lo zachu means they didn't get it achishena, but then it's be'ita, which means that it's going to have to happen. And then if it's going to have to happen, let's say, year, whatever, and whatever.
Chas v'shalom, yes, but then it happened, and then it could happen b'derech hateva, as we will see later in the Sefer. Simply, a leader emerges, someone who's known as a leader, he emerges, he leads the Jewish people, and because he's such a great teacher and a leader, he then leads them, and they go from level to level until they are worthy of miracles. Okay, but we're jumping the gun. Let's try to keep focus here. I know there are a lot of questions. They will be answered, but we have, like I said, keep saying to everyone, there's a whole sefer to get through, so we can't get all our answers right away. We have to take it step by step. Okay. So
Sara, maybe I could say a few questions, but then I guess they don't have to be answered if they're answered later in the sefer, right? So one question is the same question that Chassia was asking, just someone actually asked on Shabbos the same question. And I'm curious with the calculation of like Shabbos, when is actually Be'ita? Because it seems like we're already, like we're not Achishena, because we're already so late, like Mashiach is overdue majorly. Like Rabbi said already so many years ago that Kalo Kala Kitzin, that all the times finished. That means we're like past Achishena. That's what it seems like. And like when is the last Ita? Like besides for what we said last time about like the fact of the Rabbi's Nevuah, that it's Dar Shvi, so that's a separate topic. But let's say if we didn't have the Nevuah of the Rabbi, like before our generation, when was that year? Like if according to the 6,000 year plan, because 6,000 is too late, like, right? That's already nighttime. When is like the final date if we wouldn't be looking at Dar Shvi and the Nevuah of the Rabbi?
So we can't really say when is that. We know that we already, according to the Rebbe, Shabbos afternoon, it's already time. But according to the Zohar, like, we talk about.
I mean Friday afternoon.
We're now Friday afternoon, but Friday afternoon is Erev Shabbos. That means we're already at the time. Now, when we talk about according to the Zohar, the latest time is the year 6,000, because that's when you're entering Shabbos. So you can say, okay, what's 18 minutes before? So a couple of years before that, right? That would be the latest stage.
That's nightfall. 6,000 is nighttime already, no?
We're saying, so we bench look 18 minutes before, right?
An hour and 18 minutes before, usually.
What? I'm sorry?
Hour and 18 minutes before.
Right, because we do before Shkia, not safe, before Shkia.
So I'm just curious, like the final time, if we wouldn't be looking at the Nevuah of the Rebbe, when would be the final time? I'm just curious if anyone calculated, even though we
calculate that. You can take your 1,000 years, because 1,000 years is the day, okay? Right? From nightfall, so then from Thursday night to Friday night to Shabbos, that's your 1,000 years. And divide that up and get your hour and your bit, and a bit, your 18 minutes before, and that's your Be'ita, right? When Shabbos comes in, that's the final time that it can happen. But for us, but we're getting off track here, because like the Rebbe always said, we are not supposed to be calculating Kitzim and calculating Ita. We have to know for us, as the Rebbe told us from the Nevuah, that Mashiach, it's our generation, it's now. And forget about all the other things. We know we are already Erev Shabbos. We are late Erev Shabbos. We were ready at the time where it's already Be'ita. Now it's finished already. We finished everything else. It's not miraculous in the hundreds of years before. It's right now. We are already Erev Shabbos. We know a lot of people bring Shabbos in early, and it's still considered Be'ita at the right time. We are already very late Erev Shabbos. It's time. We don't have to make calculations and give excuses on when the Be'ita is. We don't even want to know about it. Right now we want to know Mashiach is supposed to come. It's supposed to come today. Finished. And that's the thing. Okay, now we are certainly, according to the Be'ita, which is, we're in this Erev Shabbos time already. We are already in the Be'ita. So Mashiach has to come. It's like, there's no question anymore.
I guess also, wait, you're still in the middle of asking questions? Because I had another question. Or comment.
Actually, like for the Rebbe's Nevuah, we're like at the end. So we're at the finish line. That's without a question. And the Rebbe's Nevuah must come true. So we don't have to think past that. Chassia, you go first. What were you going to ask?
Well, because I guess all of my questioning was about, when you emphasized, Sara, on this last sentence, that was a very important one. So it got me thinking about the stages. And does that possibly mean that b'derech hateva, I mean, it's hard to say all these speculations, but it's seeming like a little bit maybe that b'derech hateva, like a regular leadership, is the period of the Rebbe's leadership before Gimel Tammuz, and then we're going through, B'emshech Israel Yalo Midarga Ladarga. We're getting on higher and higher spiritual levels, even though this is, seemingly very dark, but it's the Chevlei Mashiach, and we're all becoming much closer to this sudden miraculous appearance that Be'ez Hashem is going to happen any minute. So I see you're saying same thoughts. So yeah.
But it's not just after Gimel Tammuz. You could say, and again, this is something that we're going to look at much more in depth later on in the Sefer. But this idea that in a miraculous way, when you say, oh, we've had this before, a person in a generation who is the Mashiach of that generation, who people recognize as a leader of the generation, and throughout the Rebbe's Messiahs, the Rebbe lifted us up. The Rebbe took us midarga l'darga l'darga. Now we're in a time of chayshach kafel mechupal, where at the time, like Moshe Rabbeinu, when he told the Yidden, you're going to go out, Gula, it's time for your Gula, and then Moshe Rabbeinu disappears for a while, right? And then he comes back. It's the same, it's this notion that we know it's coming, but that raising us from level to level happens throughout the Rebbe's leadership. It's not just after Gimel Tammuz, but we are working toward that to be able to see the miracles. I'm very conscious of the time. I don't want to leave us right in the middle of nowhere. So can we just finish this little section?
Okay, so maybe
go ahead.
Rifki, you read. No, you read.
I love how you read, Chassi, but okay. I love your accent. Both of your accents, Hebrew and the English. Both of them are really nice. So, ubehetem li karin zet mevar Rebbe as hasuknainis hashainim shebedivrei Rambam idas eskalas hamashiach. So, in accordance with this, like foundational explanation, the Rebbe explains the different styles of the Rambam when he explains the revelation of Mashiach. Shebehilchas Melech HaMashiach ba Rambam Mataras Eskalas Mashiach ba'ofen haminimali hamechuyev al pi halacha. So when there's a sefer halachas Melech HaMashiach, the Rambam is telling us the absolute minimum of what has to happen according to halacha. And therefore, he can't tell us, about zachu, because that's not the minimum. That doesn't have to happen. So he tells us lai zachu, that everything's going to be natural. That the pu'ulas of Mashiach are happening in a natural way, step by step. But in the letter that he wrote to the Temanim, he's explaining the process of the revelation of Mashiach, the way it would be if we were zachu, meaning if Mashiach would come in that time, a sudden revelation with great miracles and wonders. And then it would have to be really miraculous, because a long time ago, nothing could happen naturally. Now, everything with technology, like you don't need so many miracles, but if Mashiach would
also, the times of the Rambam, we weren't yet Erev Shabbos,
Right. And also, like, just practically, there was no way to get to Eretz Yisrael. Like, there was no planes, there was no any, and okay. So according to this, we could maybe apply the same thing about the difference between halachas Melech HaMashiach and the Rambam's Pirush on the Mishnah. Shebemikra shel lai zachu malchus Mashiach tiyeh b'tzchila k'fi ha'metuar b'hilchas Melech HaMashiach. So if we are not Zaycha, then it would be the way it says in the Hilchas Melech HaMashiach, Chazar li David u'shleima ve'selai, like only get back to where we were before, to the way it was by the days of David and Shleima.
And nothing more, and that's it, right? Nothing more than that.
And only then we can get step by step to reach the level of the elevated level that's described in the Pirush on the Mishnah. But if we're Zaycha, then we can skip past the natural part and jump straight to the way the Rambam explains in the Pirush on the Mishnah, in the miraculous way. Mishnah Torah, Inyane Sefer Makabetz Lehilchas Torah. So to go deeper, maybe we can explain it like this: that the Mishnah Torah is gathering the halachas of the Torah. Halachas Melech Mashiach shebesiyam hasefer kavanas shel Rambam beikar lo levar mal Mashiach ela le'rois ketzat kol halachas Torah shebesefer yiskashmu b'payal idei Melech Mashiach. So in the Sefer Halachos, the Rambam's purpose, his main purpose, is not just to explain the topic of Mashiach, right? Who is Mashiach? What is Mashiach? But to show us how all of the halachas of the Torah that are written until this point are going to be fulfilled and actually materialize through Melech HaMashiach. So that's like the sicha from the Malchus, right? It's about campaign. That's the idea is we have this at the end because this is when we're going to be able to fulfill all the other halachas of the Torah. Lefichach ikar ha'irichos, the Rambam Sham he ages shleimus hamitzvos la'aseh. So basically here it's explaining the point is not about miracles or not miracles, but the focus is in the halachas of the Rambam, the main focus is the shleimus of the mitzvahs that we're going to have in Mashiach times, and that's what he's focused on. Umefarik to Mashiach yivana mikdash v'azikru b'kol ha'karbanos v'yikavetz kol Yisrael la'eretz v'az yasu shmitim yeglis b'chol mitzvasa hamura b'Torah. So over in the Rambam is telling us all the things that are going to happen, which will enable us to keep the mitzvahs. So what do we need to keep the mitzvahs? We need the Beis HaMikdash, we need to be in Eretz Yisrael, we need a king, right? And then we can keep all of the mitzvahs that are written in the Torah. V'hini al pi halacha ha'maiser ho'ikar. So according to halacha, the main thing is the maiser, right? That we're going to be able to keep the halachas. We'll be able to fulfill all of the mitzvahs with Kabbalah's all, right? Accepting Hashem as our king and doing as well. So according to this goal, right, of keeping all the mitzvahs, it's enough to have a king on the level of David and Shlomo who can kind of force or inspire all the Yidden to accept upon themselves Malchus Shemayim and to fulfill all the mitzvahs. There's no need for a king on a higher level, according to halacha. So that's why in the Sefer Halachos, the Rambam doesn't see a reason to mention the fact that Mashiach will be greater than David U'Shleima, because his only purpose there is to show us how there will be a time when we can fulfill all the mitzvahs of the Torah, all the previous halachos. Maybe anyone else wants to continue? Maybe Liba or Sima Shkila? What do you say, Sara? Should I continue or
keep going?
The Kevin Shakiyam call Mrs. Satara extra Bederach Hatava Legamri Nibli Lezakik Lenaflice Yesis Seder Haragel. And since the fulfillment of the mitzvahs of the Torah is definitely possible Bederach Hatava, completely in a natural way, without needing any wonders or any changes from the regular order of the world, right? And the Rambam explains that we must say that it could be fulfilled B'derech HaTava, otherwise it means we don't really believe in Torah, that it's even possible to fulfill it in the natural order of the world. So, like we saw, it actually was this way in the time of David and Shlomo, that that the Yidden were able to keep all of the mitzvahs of the Torah completely, besides for the Ari Mikla, right? Without needing any special wonders. Therefore, the Rambam didn't see any reason to mention the wonders that will be in that time. Okay, and even more so, he purposely didn't include it. He says, he even like negates the concept of miracles because he says, don't think that Mashiach has to do miracles. Because we're not allowed to think that in order to have Shleimus HaMitzvahs, we need wonders and miracles. Kafishi Sara, the comment by Richa says, we'll explain further at length. But in the explanation on the Mishnah, the Rambam has a different goal. He's explaining the concept of Yemais Mashiach, the days of Mashiach, explaining it for its own sake and what it truly is. So there he takes the time to explain the real inyan of Mashiach, which is the revelation of Hashem's Malchus in the whole world, through Melech HaMashiach. So the fact that we could keep the mitzvahs and keep all the halachas, that's only the expression of Hashem's Malchus, but that's not the whole story. Like the goal is that Hashem should be king over the entire world, including all the Goyim. And so there he explains the true Maila of Mashiach, which is greater than the Mailas of David and Shlomo. And he explains that there will be wonders that will be beyond the laws of nature. As we'll explain later on in the Sefer. So it's not the point of the two stages of Mashiach, but it's just because there's a different goal. One is explaining halacha, a book of halacha, so we're talking 100% focused on halacha, and in the Mishnayos, focusing on the really understanding the idea, the concept of Yemais Mashiach, what it's really about. Hashem's Malchus.
That's right. And this fits in with the entire methodology really of the Rebbe, which is always to find, like we said before, the whole idea of reconciling different parts is because from the Rebbe's perspective, right, Torah is Torah's emes completely in whatever part it is. And therefore we have to also recognize that it's about context. And that's how the Rebbe always says it's one Torah and one Torah's emes. And when you understand the context of where things are written, then you don't just take the view, oh, the Rambam's contradicting himself. No, the Rambam isn't contradicting himself. He's explaining things depending on the context of where he's writing this. So whether it's Ilchos Tshuva, Ilchos Melech HaMalachim, Yigeres Teman, that we didn't go into depth, but we will in Hashem in the future, sure, go into depth into that, or Perish Mishnayos, it all does come together, depending, again, on the purpose of what the Rambam is writing at that particular time. But it's not that they're all contradicting each other. It's just we need to see it from a higher perspective to be able to know exactly what we're talking about and not to think that we're seeing pure contradictions. So that brings us to the end of our share for tonight. Thank you all for joining, and in Mitzvah Hashem, we will continue next week.
Thank you so much, Sara. Like finally.
Amen.
That's right.
Amen.
We should
And Rivki was, sorry. Rivki, it was a pleasure to listen to you also reading. It was beautiful. And also thank you to Sara. I really enjoyed this whole share. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Is everyone here from Australia or is it also overseas?
No, it's overseas. Mostly, well, today we have overseas. We have Etty from South Africa and Liba. I'm not sure where Liba's from.
I'm from Israel. From
Nice.
Bet Shemesh.
Nice.
Yep. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too. And everyone else is left.
I'm trying to put on my camera and my video, and it's not working. So I have to find out when we go why it's not working.
Right. Okay.
All right. Okay. Take care. All the best.
All the best.
Cole.
Take care. Shkoyach. Bye-bye.
Jerusalem.
Amen.